But that, and that woman, I mean, that was one of our regular customers. We called them frequent flyers. That woman ultimately died from all the beatings he gave her.
Really?
It wasn't one incident that killed her. It was all the beatings he gave her over the life of their relationship. So he was never charged.
But it led to illness after illness after illness, I'm sure, for her.
Correct. Injury after injury, not necessarily illness.
Wow.
And she died as a result of all those injuries.
Unbelievable. How did it change from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s? I mean, we became more aware as a society. When my parents split up in 1980, I don't remember any other kids on our block even being divorced, let alone anybody else knowing about domestic violence.
In the mid to late 80s, after the Domestic Abuse Assistance Act was passed in 82, more departments became aware, and thank God for the battered women's movement, because they demanded that their police agencies become aware of these laws. Mm-hmm. That's how I got started in domestic violence, when they came to file a complaint that the police were not doing what the law required. And I made the mistake of saying, "What law?"
Oh, boy.
We didn't have the internet and computers back then, and I got a copy of the law and realized very quickly we were in bad shape in compliance. So the then director of Faith House and I and an assistant DA put together a little team to train all the local law enforcement agencies, and I've been doing that for years ever since. But that's how law enforcement evolved. It was a combination of the battered women's movement pressuring them into changing, and a combination of state laws. And many agencies started, or many areas started what they called coordinated community response teams.
Okay.
And we started one of those in 88 or 89. And that ultimately became the board of directors of the first board of directors of the Family Violence Intervention Program. I was on that coordinated community response team. And we quickly identified that there was no services for batterers to help end the cycle of violence, and put together the program and started it in city court, and started out very small, 2 or 3 people in a class. A local psychiatric hospital sent 2 people to Duluth to be trained, and they held the first class in their facility, and that went on for a couple of years until we got big enough to have a second class, and we trained some more and hired an executive director, and have grown immensely from then.
Ever since then. So, wow, so many different changes that you've witnessed. I mean, your time obviously as a law enforcement official, and your time here as executive director, but then even in the interim when you were on the board and helping. When we talk about power and control, these abusers will use anything, money, your kids.
Correct.
They never take blame for anything. Tell me more about things that people need to be looking for so that they too can understand, maybe if they're not even in that situation.
Batterers like to minimize, deny, and alibi about violence. If they make the mistake and leave a physical, visible mark on a victim, they'll tell their friends and everybody that she fell, or she walked into a wall, or whatever story they come up with. Very frequently, when they hit her in the house, their response to her is, "Well, you made me do it. If you would have
done X,
fill
Y,
in the blank, done this, that, or the other, that wouldn't have happened." And they minimize. That was just a love tap. That was just a little push. And that's a common technique, and that happens early in the violent stages.
Mm.
Male privilege. You know, Western society has been a patriarchal society since its existence. The man was in charge of the house and head of the household and king of the castle and all of those other. Are you familiar with the term rule of thumb?
Sure. But you tell people in case they don't know what the rule of thumb, how it originated.
English common law. England has common law, which is prior jurisprudence, prior case law, not statutory law, says that a man can discipline his wife with a rod as long as it's no bigger than his thumb. So that's a...
I just want people who hear that.
The legal system.
And I want people who are hearing that right now, in case you never knew that, you might want to think about that before you use it again. You know, I'm just saying, I've thought about it over time, and I've thought, you know, everybody says cliches. I mean, you know, that's what it's become, but the meaning behind it is pretty startling.
It is. Another technique batters use is money, economics. They may not let the woman work. I mean, many cases of domestic violence start out in the workplace when he shows up and raises Cain in the workplace and does violence in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
He'll either show up there to cause enough trouble to get the boss to fire her, or he will adamantly refuse to make her work, let her work. And then in many instances, in some instances, batters let them work, but they got to bring him her check.
Wow.
And she gets an allowance. And out of that allowance, she's got to buy the groceries and pay the bills and all of that. And out of his allowance,
he does whatever he wants?
He does whatever he wants.
Wow.
That's a common tactic of batterers. So, and using kids is another one that you talked about earlier. They tell the woman that if she leaves, she ain't leaving with the kids. And if she does leave with the kids, I'm going to get them back because you're crazy. You're a terrible mother. You're a bad cook. You're a bad housekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to have these children. And that's a common tactic of batterers.
Yeah. So how does a woman ever, if you're being assaulted by all of these levels, they're using coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse. They isolate you. They minimize their own behavior, but they blame you for it. Then they tell you they're going to take your kids. They've got all the money. This male privilege idea, this dominance idea. You've got all of these things against you. That's why women don't just leave. Correct. As we think about it in society now. They can't. Emotionally, they've been so beaten down.
And also, who's going to support me?
Right.
I haven't worked in X number of years, if at all. I have a high school diploma, never could go to college. Where am I going to live? I'm going to go back and stay at my mama's house? That's another big, powerful reason, economics. And as I mentioned earlier, religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. God don't like divorce. Mm-hmm. And that's preached in many, many churches even today. Mm-hmm. So, and that male privilege thing, he's the head of the household. He rules the roost. Mm-hmm. But women hesitate to leave for all those very powerful reasons. Some of them, most of them are psychological, but some of them are pretty practical. Mm-hmm. Again, where am I going to go? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to a shelter with, 14 other women and 6 teenage boys. And that's, while that's safe, that's certainly not
optimal,
alluring for a woman to leave her house to go live in a shelter. Mm-hmm. So, and recently, it's been about a year, just over a year, that Lafayette has started what we call the Family Justice Center of Acadiana. Mm-hmm. And in this facility, we have housed the sheriff's office, the city police, Faith House, the Rape Crisis Center, Sexual Abuse Response Center, the clerk of court's office, the DA, the city prosecutor, all have people that staff that building where a victim can go and basically have a one-stop session where she can see any of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Acadiana Legal Services. Now, they don't man an office in our facility, but they work with us very regularly.
Mm-hmm. And you have to have everybody coming together.
Correct.
To be able to combat this. Ralph Peters, Executive Director of the Family Violence Intervention Program. We've been talking with him about domestic violence, about the program, what leads to some of the situations, and trying to understand better, the complicated nature of domestic violence. One of the questions would be, how do we help people who are the abusers if they don't understand what they're doing, if they can't even acknowledge what they're doing? How are they going to change their behavior? FVIP, what do you do? I mean, if the abuser is sent to your class, what happens the first day and then the next class? And tell us about it.
First class have to get up and tell their story.
Okay.
Why they're there.
Okay.
And, I'm not saying our facilitators do a great job, but our newest facilitator has been doing this 10 years.
Wow.
We have 4 that have been with the program since they were not the first, because that was a couple, not a couple, but that was a pair of people at Vermilion Hospital trained.
Mm-hmm.
But they were sure in the next bunch of facilitators that we hired. So they know the ropes. They've heard all the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because guys that have been in the class for several weeks, several months, they know the story too.
Because they
call them when they call the guy out when he's telling the story, if he embellishes, lies, or cheats.
Really?
Yes, they know the tricks of the trade. So that's a pretty interesting scenario. And after they tell the story, then they sit down and they participate. The program includes video material. The program includes role playing. Very little lecture in the program.
Okay.
A lot of group discussion. Now, obviously, we get men that go through and sit there like a bump on a log and don't participate. But I have to say this. The only way I have of measuring recidivism is by the number of people that come back through our program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 6%.
So it's very low.
That's very, very low. Now, I'm not saying that they've never arrested again.
Right.
But I can't legally check arrest records. Maybe one day I'll get a grant and get some cooperation from the state to allow us to run criminal histories in furtherance of a grant, studying that.
Mm-hmm.
But the national research shows that the average recidivism rate for people who successfully complete a Batterers Intervention program is about 30%.
Wow.
Without the program, or if they fail to complete it, it jumps up to 60%.
Wow.
Recidivism rate.
Yeah. Big difference.
Big difference. So there is some evidence that these programs work. And that's not, when I say a Batterers Intervention program, I'm not specifying simply the Duluth model. It's the Emerge and the Amend model and many other programs that combine the three around the nation.
What kind of activities? You said role playing and different things. I'm assuming it's different for every person, when they go in there. But can you see the light come on at some point and they realize that they've been doing this all wrong? That they're, that you can't try to control someone and what it leads to if you do.
Yes. Many times facilitators can see the light and they know when they've hit home and work hard to reinforce that. But just as many of them, the light never goes off because that's the way they were raised. That's the way they're raising their kids. And unfortunately, they don't respond to that. That's why we've had 6% recidivism.
Mm-hmm. And at that particular point, you don't know. You don't know if they go back into the same relationship or if it's a different relationship. Do you see people come back into have you seen them come back into FVIP, though?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
6%. I mean, we've had 4,800 people, and about 300 have come back through.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not quite 300. Yeah, we've seen a few. Recently, I've seen a few more come back through.
Are things changing with domestic violence? I don't know if it's because of social media and we're much more aware now. Is the problem getting worse, in your opinion, or is it about the same? We just hear more about it.
Oddly enough, I track domestic violence arrests. I get the daily arrest report sheet emailed to me from the sheriff's office every day. And although I didn't look at the numbers, 2016 was higher, much higher than 2017. But 2018 now, we're only 2 months into the year, is running at the same rate as 2016. So, but every year that I've tracked them since 2012, they've gone up. Except 2017, they dropped.
Wow, considerably. Anything to pinpoint on that, or no?
No.
Just back and forth with stats.
I can't, and I got to say that on the daily arrest reports that I get emailed to me, they capture the first charge listed on the arrest report. So if the guy's charged with a warrant and domestic abuse battery, and a warrant was first, I don't see him.
I see. So
I eventually find him when he comes to court, if he goes to court, and I add him to the arrest reports. So
how can the judges help? I mean, you go to city court, you go to district court. Let's see, city court, Francie Bouillon, Doug Saloom. Are those your judges?
Those are the two judges in city court.
So they will refer people to FVIP?
Anybody that pleads guilty or gets convicted.
Okay.
Domestic abuse battery gets sent to FVIP.
Okay. And then in district court, is it the same thing, or you're adding on to that, or how does that work?
It's basically the same thing. We get those referrals. As a matter of fact, there's a district court misdemeanor docket that includes domestic violence today, and I'm hoping we'll sign up 3 or 4 more people today. Actually, I hope we don't sign up anybody. But
right, it'd be nice if we didn't have this problem.
We're probably going to sign up 3 or 4 people today. Because we actually go and sit in the court session so we can sign them up and get them in. Because if they're given a business card, say, call this number,
they're not going to call you.
And bingo.
Wow.
So
you really have to physically be there.
Correct.
To sign these people up. And so it's the judge that gives out this sentence in lieu of them spending 120 days in jail?
They're put on probation in district court. The jail time is 6 months. In city court, it's 4 months. But it's suspended on the condition they attend the Batterers Intervention program, which state law allows them to do.
So state law allows them to do that. Should there be more people, though, going to your program? Are you actually getting to get these people, all of the people that are batterers, are you getting them into your program?
No.
Oh, okay.
We get our sources of clients are from our biggest source now is from Lafayette Parish Court.
Okay.
When I first started, it was from Lafayette City Court, but Parish Court has grown, and
I see.
They do a lot more in total cases of domestic violence because they do all the sheriff and Broussard and Youngsville and Karen Crow and Doosan PD and Scott PD, whereas City Court only does Lafayette PD. We get referrals from Lafayette City Court, Lafayette District Court. We get referrals from Family Court, the two family court judges, when they think that the perpetrator will benefit from it when they issue a protective order.
Okay.
I would really like to see them send more of those people to us, but we're not there to sign them up. So they, I get a copy of all the protective orders that are issued, and very few of them, let me rephrase that. I get a copy of the protective orders that order the guy to come to FVIP.
Right.
Very few of them show up, call and make an appointment. And when I call them, 9 times out of 10, the number on the protective order is wrong.
It's wrong, or they don't answer, it's out of service,
right.
Whatever the case may be. So if somebody comes into court and they don't get sent to this program to try to rehabilitate them, do they just go back out and keep beating up on their wife or their girlfriend?
Yes. In fact, I've seen numerous. I've seen several times a defendant say, "Put me in jail. I don't want to go to that program."
Really?
I'd rather spend 4 months in jail and
then have to go to this program.
Have to go to that program for 6 months.
You think it's fear? You think it's?
No, I think it's.
They just don't care.
They're generally not repeat domestic offenders, but frequent flyers in the criminal justice system. And it's easier to do 4 months in jail and have to go to class one night a week and pay for the class and do all of that. So they take their lumps and go to jail. And many of them are facing other charges that they can get credit for that time. So
I see. So if 100 people end up in district court, say, and it's domestic violence, they won't all go to your program then necessarily. And I guess the same thing for city court. If you had 100 in there, they wouldn't, and it was all domestic violence, they wouldn't all necessarily go to your program.
Sometimes the prosecutors reduce the charges, dismiss the charges.
Okay.
Very often, when officers make a dual arrest, by that I mean arrest both the man and the woman, the prosecutor will dismiss the charge against the woman.
Is it usually because she's defending herself, or?
That could be, or they come to a plea bargain where I'll drop hers if you plead guilty. I see.
Okay.
That's a common, but generally the woman is the victim. So now I do have a women's group.
I was gonna just thinking about asking you. Yeah, tell me about this women batterers group. I mean, I don't think people would know. Gee, we have this program in Lafayette, and out of 5 classes, one of them is for women.
Right. We started that program before I became executive director, long before I became, at the request of the judges, I believe the city court judges. And we generally have anywhere from 8 to 18 women in it. Now, since I've taken over, I interview every woman that is sent to us. And if I determine that she's a victim, I send them to Faith House.
Right. Okay.
They have to go to 26 sessions at Faith House. And when they complete, we notify the court that they're complete. And Faith House doesn't charge them.
I see.
So, but that's only for those that I clearly identify as the victim.
As the victim.
Now.
For perpetrators, female perpetrators?
Right, for female perpetrators.
They just go through your course.
So, but the women we have in there are either the batterer in the relationship, or they are fighters who
don't want to die from being beaten to death.
Well, I don't want to say don't want to die, because if I think that they're defending themselves, like I said, I'll send them to Faith House. They're they just fight.
Just fight.
Right.
Okay. So it's just part of what they do.
It's part of their lifestyle.
As we're wrapping up, what kind of changes can we make in the way we think about this now that we've had this time to talk to you? What impression do you want to leave people? One thing that Billy Lacombe from Faith House tells me all the time is, I don't want anybody to ever ask me again, why doesn't she leave? Because Billy said that's not the question. The question needs to be, why does he beat up on her?
Leaving is not a crime.
Right.
I mean, staying is not a crime. The crime is him beating her. Now, the national statistics show that 85% of domestic violence cases are male perpetrator, female victim. and about 5% are female perpetrators and male victims, and the rest are same sex. So, yeah, women do batter, and there's no question about that. It's just not nearly as frequently as men batter, because the man is the bigger, stronger, traditionally the breadwinner, et cetera, et cetera. And what impression do I want to leave? I want to leave the impression that Lafayette has perhaps the premier battered women's program in the state of Louisiana. Was the president last year of the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So, I can compare them to other programs from that. And the program in New Orleans is probably just as good, but Lafayette and New Orleans have the two best battered women programs in the state, and I would urge members of our community to support either the battered women's program or the family violence intervention program. Mm-hmm. Although 90% of our revenues come from fees, we still...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are administrative costs. I mean, these batterers are having to pay to attend these classes, and that's, a good percentage. But there are other, things that you have to do in the office,
insurance, audit fees, internet,
all
phone.
The things required.
Correct.
Yeah, to be a part of a.
We have to pay the facilitators.
Mm-hmm. And you got to be able to do that. And so, like you said, donating is a good way for that to happen too. Ralph, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I feel as if I have learned even more than I knew before, sitting on the board, having, my history as a child. I mean, I really feel like I learned so much more today. So I hope people listening will remember, don't ask that question, why doesn't she leave? Ask the question, why is one person abusing another person?
Or better yet, ask the question, how can I help her?
That's right.
And it may be as simple as taking her to your house and calling Faith House.
That's right.
When I was training police officers, I used to always end my presentation. It was easy when it was around here because I know the number by heart. I'd say the last thing you should do before you leave the scene after you arrest a guy is pick up the phone and dial 232-8954, and some wonderful woman is going to answer that phone who cares and is concerned, and give it to her and say, here, Bernie, talk to this lady. Because if you leave her with a card with Faith House's number on it, she's not going to call. She's not going to call. Mm-hmm. But if she talks to somebody who cares, she may be a lot more willing to work to get out of the relationship. And even Faith House will tell you many of their victims don't want to get out of that relationship, no matter how bad it is.
It's extremely difficult, that's right. And for a variety of different reasons.
Correct.
Absolutely. Executive Director of FVIP, Ralph Peters, thank you for your time today.
I want to thank you for your service to us by being on our board.
Well, I'm happy to do it.
This year, you're president of our board, so thank you very much.
You are very welcome, sir.